James, you're driving now, but can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
Can you tell me, does God know the future?
Yes. From whose point of view? You're speaking from the individual's point of view.
Yeah, from a human level.
God doesn't know the future because there's no future or past or present for the God. God is the future, present, and the past. But if you think you're an individual person, then the future is known. The future is all laid out. That's owing to the fact that there are two states of consciousness, the manifest state and the unmanifest state. And you think there's a future because things are not manifest, but everything that's unmanifest becomes manifest at some point, and that's the future. So if you want to know what the future is, the way to do that is to do actions now, and that will produce the future for you. So you're taking care of your future self when you're doing actions. And God is the one that delivers those results of your actions. So,
I'm asking because some people claim they had a vision that became true a year or two later.
Sure, that's right. That's normal.
But how is that possible if God doesn't know the future?
Well, God's the one that gave them that vision.
So God knows the future.
God does know the future, but God doesn't know it like you know it. God just delivers the results of your actions at the right time. He delivers appropriate and timely results.
Okay, so I pursue an action now, but it might only fructify.
It fructifies in the future.
2 years later, yeah.
2 years later, or 5 years later, or 2 seconds later, or 2 minutes later. Who knows? No, that's why you never really know. So you should always keep your mind in the present and have a strategy for dealing with whatever comes up in the future. And that strategy is Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga just said, okay, I don't know what the future is. I want to keep my mind working, functioning now in the present so I can deal with what comes up. And when something comes up, I'll just take it as a gift from God. And if it's something I like, I'll thank God for it. And if it's something I don't like, I'll thank God for it. Why? Because I learned something from it. It's an opportunity to learn. So in this way, God teaches us without knowing that it's teaching us. Because God's not a big doer with a mind that is different from us.
You said God is not a big doer?
No, God's not a big person with likes and dislikes. It's keeping track of your karma. But it delivers your karma according to the needs of the total. God's the part of yourself that takes care of everything. Not just your problems, but the future of the whole race and the whole planetary systems and the whole everything. Everything is manufactured, is regulated and governed and controlled by God.
But if God is not a big person, why do all religion show God as a big person?
Well, because people can't imagine something that's impersonal. Because they think they're persons, so they project or they personify or project personhood on God, which is okay. Unfortunately, it has a downside.
What's the downside?
The downside of projecting a personhood on God?
Yeah.
Well, then you have an opportunity to have either a positive or negative feelings about God. So when God gives you what you want, when God gives you what you don't want, you blame God. And when God gives you what you do want, you thank God. You think God's a lovely God. The problem with that is that you've got a conflict about what God is, because God can't be both a good God and a bad God. Right? God's non-dual. God's only awareness, or of consciousness appearing as what? As a controller, regulator, and governor. But it's the total mind that's controlling, regulating, and governing, not a big person in the sky. But it looks like a big person in the sky, so people are fooled. They just assume that man is cast in the image of God, and so God must be just like us. Well, God's like us, but God's not us. And we're like God, but we're not God. So I need to know in what sense I am the same as God, and in what sense I'm different from God. So I don't treat God like a person. Understand? Because if you treat God like a person, God doesn't know what's wrong with you. God, because God's not a person. So God can't even register that thought.
Say it again. God cannot.
Well, if you see if something happens that you like, then you're pleased with God. You say it's God's grace.
Yeah.
If something happens that you don't like, then you get angry at God. You say this is God's will.
Yeah, that's the most common phenomena in religion, I think.
That's the most common phenomenon, to blame God or to praise God for the results of the action. But God's not a person, so he's not amenable. In other words, he's not amenable to praise and blame. Right? Because he's not a person.
Yeah.
But you think he's a person. Right? You see? But God's not a person. God looks like a person. It seems to be a person, but it's not actually a person. So the problem is always with you and how your understanding of what God is.
Yeah.
And Vedanta makes it clear in what way we're the same as God, because we have to be the same as God if this is a non-doer reality. At the same time, we are not God. We're different from God. And how are we different? Well, we have limited knowledge and power, and pervasiveness, and God is limitless in his power, knowledge, and pervasiveness. God's everywhere. We're not everywhere. We're only local. We're not global. We're not universal. Our power is small. We have certain power, which we're borrowing from God, but God's controlling everything. So God's so powerful that he controls everything that exists, right? And knowledge, we have limited knowledge, but God's knowledge is limitless. That's called omniscience, omnipotence, and all pervasiveness. Right? Omnipresence is the word they use in English, but it's the same as pervasive. So God is everything in which everything happens, and which makes everything to happen. You can only make small things to happen in your life, but you can't make everything happen.
Yeah, that's another common issue among religious people. Like, if God is omnipotent, why does he allow misery to happen?
Yeah, God doesn't allow, or God's not a permitter or an enjoyer. He's not a person. The very question is a problem, because you're saying that God is a person that has choice. But God's not a person with choice. You see, there's another personification. You're projecting our qualities on God. We have choice. We have free will. God doesn't have any free will. So he can't permit things to happen or keep things from happening. But it looks like that. That's why we're fooled. And then you shouldn't blame yourself because you're fooled. Everybody's ignorant. Understand?
Yeah, that's a powerful statement that God doesn't have free will.
Yeah, God doesn't have free will. It's not a person. Jiva has free will. Individuals have free will, and he can either use their free will according to I'm not going to do anything. Okay, well then, but you're not going to stop thinking and feeling, and you're not going to stop being or having a life. Your life's going to go on. Well, on what principles is it going to go on? On God's principles. God will just give you what's good for the total. If what you're doing is helpful to the total, then you'll do that. If what you're doing is harmful to the total, then you'll do harm, and you'll operate. Your harm will work to do what it needs to do. So this is very difficult to understand. So
well, it's pretty straightforward, actually.
It is straightforward logically, but it's very hard to understand because everybody thinks they're a person.
Yeah.
See, we're saying you're not a person.
And God is not either.
And God's not either. We're saying that everything is consciousness, and consciousness or existence and consciousness are the same thing. Everything is just existence, consciousness. And that's not a person. Yeah, that quotation I put up recently at the end of Trout Lake was about that. It was about one fine day you just realize that that you're not a person. The world stops. And the status of the world changes. You thought this world was real before, but now you see it's not real. So you're not attracted to it anymore. You find it entertaining, but it has no power to injure you or to bless you. It's just like watching a movie. And you just sit there as awareness. And there's nobody looking over your shoulder, judging you or questioning you, second guessing you all the time, asking you why you did this and why you did that, and you should do this and you shouldn't do that, and all that sort of thing. It's just not there anymore. So that's the value, is that you're satisfied. You're satisfied with yourself as you are. However you think of yourself, you're satisfied. If you think of yourself as a jiva, you're satisfied. If you think of yourself as consciousness, you're satisfied. So the common factor is just perfect satisfaction. No matter what, you're perfectly satisfied. Because you're always awareness. You never were a person. And when you assimilate this knowledge, you see I never was a person. I never sought God. I never got qualified. I never had a guru, etc., etc., etc.
Okay, we are entering Malaga now, and my hands are hurting.
Yeah, and the traffic's getting up, so let's call it quits.